Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Ashton. Many years ago, I got into the pursuit of science, trying to explain the unexplained, with the goal of explaining climate change because I knew it was very important. We're at risks of losing the planet. And then it went on from there to explaining sustainable energy technology or, alternate forms of energy production which are sustainable. In doing this, I believe that the theory of everything is complete. I will try and explain this all to you. I might repeat myself in a couple of areas because it all does come together, okay? Excuse me. So, first off, understanding the fundamental forces of the universe. There are three of them. Gravity, which is just electromagnetism. Essentially, our core, the Earth's core, is an electromagnetic nuclear reactor. And it's actually that electricity which is sustained at the Earth's core. Because it's sustained there, electricity wants to go through everything, so it's sustained there, so it's pulling everything to it. It's quantum gravity, and quantum just means energy. So we have that down there. And electromagnetism itself breaks down into two: electricity and magnetism. And then there's the nuclear force, which breaks down into two as well. There's fusion and fission. And then the third fundamental force would be consciousness. We have a left brain and a right brain, or a logical brain and an emotional brain, or we have a light side and a dark side. Breaks down into two categories, whichever way you choose to look at it. Similar to our planet, our planet has the North Pole, or the North Hemisphere, is rotating one way. It's because the energies are repelling from the other energies down there. So you have a field rotating one way, and the South Pole is rotating the opposite way. Kind of almost similar to how our brain works. The brain would have, like, neurons and these things in there that are reacting with each other as well. But anyway, so in understanding the theory of everything, when we're doing the mathematics to something tiny like an atom or a cell, micro, very small, versus doing the mathematics to something very large like a planet or a sun or a moon, the math is off. The math is off because we are using pi, which is a infinite number, so we have to round it at some point. So when you're doing the math between something so small and something so large, that causes our calculations to be off on that. It's not accurate because you're doing that. I came up with a theory called the 2D universe. I was trying to explain a mathematical formula without using pi to calculate the area or the of a sphere, for example. So the way that I look at it is, if you're a small object, a single point in space, you can only move a total of 700, or grow a total of 720 degrees. You have a vertical or a horizontal plane and a vertical plane. You put those two together for a total of 720 degrees. So my theory was, if you calculated it, that if you were that single point, you could just take a linear number, and by adding or subtracting to it, so that linear number by the total 720 degrees by rate of inflation. Now, what I mean by rate of inflation is because it's the degrees are going to be getting bigger, so you have to add. You can either add points in there or use another number in there to calculate that, which I just simplified by calling it the rate of inflation. But that's that. If you can finish that, by the way, you would earn a Nobel, I believe. Yeah, so understanding theory of everything, a whole bunch of Newton and Einstein's theories would be incorrect. Like, we used to look at gravity or orbits of the planets as a constant state of free fall, but rather it's in understanding orbits is so the sun has electromagnetism, and that's attracted to the surface, for example, or the masses of all the planets. It also has a set of fields, which would be called in the old formula gravitational fields, but it's just fields of electromagnetism. And so all those fields are going to be set at places where all the planets are. And the north and south poles, the electromagnetism from them connect to each other, and then so both of those, or they grip to the planets, pulling the planets in, creating a connection from the north and south pole, one would argue. And there's a little bit of discrepancy in there. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too into the science here on this one. But as well, the energy from the cores of the planets will repel from each other. So even though there's the attractive pulling of the planets and the sun to them, the energy, because energy repels from energy, so the energy will repel from the other celestial objects, the way I look at it. I did, back when, completed Einstein's theory of spooky action at a distance, and which is just quantum entanglement or electromagnetism. And so when you have two objects that are electromagnetically connected, like I was kind of just explaining, when you do one to something and they're quantumly entangled, or they have that electromagnetic connection, it happens immediately at the other side. It's been demonstrated between the Earth and the Sun. There's constant connections there, and if a connection breaks, for example, you'll have a coronal mass ejection on the Sun, or these kinds of things happen. Anyway, it's verified that science is complete. The Sun also works. Like the standard solar model is incorrect, which says our sun has energy for billions of years from an atom cycling up and down, when that's not how it works. The way that the sun actually works, and this gets a little bit complicated here, guys, because I got to add a little bit to this, but it pulls gases from the other planets, from the planets around it. So the gases are what you see lighting up. As well as in understanding the days of creation, energy will actually, and we have to calculate how much energy it requires, but an abundance of energy will itself create hydrogen, which is the atmosphere. And then it goes on from there, but for now. So what I'm saying is I would also calculate the amount of, which amount of energy it takes. So the Earth has an electromagnetosphere, and then there's also a connection between the sun and the Earth. Yeah, I'm being told not to discuss this. Anyway, so there's a whole bunch of things. So how much energy does it actually take to produce hydrogen? It said that lightning bolts, for example, leave a bunch of hydrogen. Is that hydrogen created, or is it the breaking apart of the molecules, which is a question. But both are maybe accurate, but this is happening nonetheless. It's getting pretty dark in here. Maybe I should pause this and turn the light on. But explain the gas-powered star theory. So electromagnetism from the sun is simply pulling the gases from the planets. And the cool thing about understanding that is that every star you see in a night sky is going to have at least one, probably more, planets that are producing gases. And once you have all these factors, then those are the factors what you need for life. So it just shows you how abundant life is throughout the universe. It's quite beautiful. I came up with an idea called dual rotor / stator electric motors. We're using like this coaxial type electric motors. I just figured by coming up with this, you could utilize the amount of energy. So if you have like a bunch of energy coming up in a disc here, you could put the rotors on either side, utilizing that energy, utilizing more of the energy. You could make it as large as you want. You could put it in tires for cars and stuff like that. It's just a different application of electric motors. And yeah, and the size is different. So like I said, different application. You can apply it throughout a little bit more. I already explained quantum gravity. That's important in understanding the theory of everything. I'm not really going to get more into sustainable energy, but essentially by understanding the Earth's core as electromagnetic nuclear reactor, we can mimic those. And understanding that energy creates hydrogen, and hydrogen is just the foundation for water. You should be able to, we might be able to produce potable water by having these reactors while we're making the energy we need for, say, a city or what have you. Hang on a second. It's getting pretty dark in here. I'm gonna turn the lights on. I'll be right back. Where did I leave off? Was just talking about atmospheric production. That's understanding the 6 days of creation. So on day one, there was light, which would be energy. Energy then creates hydrogen, which is gas. I would argue that there's a major difference, and we should actually have fixed the table of elements to bring this in, where you have a energy field, so a rating of the energy field, and then I would actually argue that gas doesn't have electrons. It's not I'm not 100%, but I would argue that gas in its pure form doesn't have electrons, which you could argue is plasma, for example. But so I would add in one hydrogen, maybe would be electronless, or you could have an even purer form of gas. And then the gases come, and I'm explaining the 6 days of creation. Gases, you have the gases and energy. The gases would burn, creating, that would be the creation of electrons, and which is mass, so that would be dust, but it's energized, and then so it can be added to, fueled to. I could talk about fission and fusion a little bit more maybe too, but so I would add in that. And then on the table of elements, I haven't looked at it. This is like a theoretical concept, like upgrading the table of elements. I think that you should have like a line, or we should understand this, like the most stable mass you can have based on its energy level, at which point the table of the element level fused at would be how many electrons are in there, the amount of pressure in there, and energies in there for each level. And then so you have your straight your line. I don't know what the most neutral elements are, but on either side of that line, it kind of works in two ways. I apologize if I don't get the definitions right, but it's like be like for water, where you have like an alkaline base or an acidic base, and then at that, so when those two on opposite ends react, you have a very strong reaction because they're oppositely charged, or the electron configuration when they're fused is opposite, and so you could divide it that way. Um, I think I'm just gonna leave it there. There's more to talk about, and there's more sciences in there, but I'll leave it at that. Just to mention, you can tell how gases have more, I would argue, dust in them, or other like electrons. As you go down the scale of just the gases, you go from, you get neons and you get all the other stuff. I haven't looked at the table of elements in quite a long time, so I'm kind of doing this without that in my head. And then yeah. So it kind of works like that. I would say that that's the closest to the theory of everything. Understanding the beginning of the universe to the best of our abilities, which is extremely hard to explain because you can never actually recreate those conditions. But we understand why the math's off. We understand how the planets work. We can explain how new planets and solar systems are created in the universe today, how things grow, and maybe a couple other little things in there. But this is an overall, in my opinion, um, the understanding of the theory of everything. Thanks for being here. You could say the Messiah, which is me, is signing out. Talk to you guys later.